Hi everyone. Today we will be doing a recap of what we did last week in grade 10, week 2. So we did vocabulary lesson 7, we did a PPT on rhetorical devices, and we did our story, a eulogy for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Vocabulary lesson 7. We did the words aesthetic, charisma, cliché, conceive, and emphatically. Aesthetic is the appreciation of beauty in nature, arts, or literature. Charisma is a special charm or personality that a person has. A cliché is an overused expression. To conceive means to imagine, believe, or comprehend, to understand something. Emphatically means to declare something with great passion. If we look at our pictures at the side, we'll see that we've got roses. These roses correspond with the appreciation of beauty, which is aesthetic. We've got charisma, which is a special charm, like Ellen. We all know Ellen has a very special charm. A cliché, an overused expression, something like born and bred, cruising the streets, time got away from me, play your cards right, those kinds of things. Conceive means to understand. We've got a little picture here of a girl, you know this meme, I don't understand, right? And emphatically, to declare something with great passion or to celebrate, we can see we've got football players celebrating a win quite passionately here at the bottom. Let's move on. The next words on our list is Marshal, Paradox, Prolific, Recipient, and One. Martial is anything relating to the army or military. A paradox is a contradiction or opposites that provoke a thought within us. Prolific means fertile or abundant, so having a lot of something. A recipient is the person who receives something, or to receive something. Wan means weak or pale, so to give the impression of being ill or exhausted. If we look at our pictures at the side, we'll see that we've got men in different military uniforms, so this is relating to Marshal. A paradox, we've got a picture of a chicken and an egg, which leads to the lifelong question, which came first, the egg or the chicken? Prolific, we've got a picture of tulips, so we have a lot of tulips in our garden. To receive something, there's a graduation ceremony or a diploma being handed over here. And weak or pale, we've got a young lady at the bottom here, extremely exhausted with 4 cups of coffee and she still can't seem to make it. And that is a recap of our vocabulary lesson 7. Moving on, the next thing that we had done was rhetorical devices. The reason why we're looking at rhetorical devices is to help us understand our story that we are doing next. The next story that we do includes a lot of rhetorical devices, therefore we'll be looking at these 3 in particular. First off, what is a rhetorical device? So they are strategies used by an author or a speaker to persuade the reader into a specific belief. So they basically manipulate the reader to think the way they want them to. Why do we do this? Why do they do this? To emphasize their point or their argument. Right. We have 3 types that we're looking at: repetition, rhetorical questions, and parallelism. Now, what is repetition? Repetition is when a writer intentionally repeats the same words or phrases at least 3 times to emphasize an idea and make it clearer. Our example: I want security for this country, okay? I want security. Security for our homes, security for our children. We have the word security that has been repeated 4 times, so it counts as repetition. That's wrong. They were wrong. It's the New York Times. They're always wrong. They were wrong. We have the word wrong repeated 4 times, again, repetition. A rhetorical question is when a writer asks a question for effect or to emphasize a point where there's no real answer expected, right? And the answer is often implied. So, how many people have to die before we take action? There's no specific answer to this question because every life is valuable. Therefore, there's no real answer. So it's a rhetorical question. The next example: what has an innocent animal ever done to harm you? If the animal is innocent, it means that the animal has done nothing to you, so why would you hurt it? Again, a rhetorical question. And the last one, parallelism is the use of similar grammatical constructions to express ideas that are related or of similar importance. The grammatical constructions are anything relating to grammar, all right? And they express ideas or actions that are related. So, Monica brewed espresso, steamed milk, and told jokes as she prepared Rachel's latte. Initially, she's preparing Rachel's latte. But while she's preparing Rachel's latte, she's brewing an espresso, she's steaming the milk, and she's telling jokes. She's doing three things at once while doing another thing. All right? So here's our parallelism here. Grammatical construct, so an action of similar importance while doing something. The next one. The production manager was asked to write his report quickly, accurately, and thoroughly. All right. So if he was asked to write his report quickly, accurately, and thoroughly, they all end in ly. We know that our part of speech that ends in ly is an adverb, so they are all adverbs relating to how the production manager should write his report. Therefore, parallelism. Alrighty. And that is the end of our presentation. So that's what we had done in our first two periods. First period, we did vocabulary lesson 7. Second period, we had done rhetorical devices. Now we move on to our story, a eulogy for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So we know that Martin Luther King Jr. was an extremely influential person in the civil rights movement. He was one who fought for the equal rights of African Americans throughout America. However, he was not alone. There were many people who fought with him. Robert F. Kennedy was one of them. Right, so let's break it down. The eulogy for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by Robert F. Kennedy. On April 4, 1968, hundreds of African Americans were gathered. Why were they gathered? For an exciting political event. What was the event? Presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy was coming to speak to them. He was coming to motivate them. All right. However, before he was to give his speech, he heard really, really sad news that Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated earlier that day. We look at our word assassinated, we know that our word assassinated means killed on purpose, right? Usually for political reasons. He nevertheless went to the rally. Nevertheless here is so important because it's telling us that he made a choice, all right? He made a choice and it's telling us about his personality. He went to the rally and he found that the people were still upbeat in anticipation. If they are upbeat in anticipation, it means that they have no idea what had happened. So he quickly realized that they were unaware of the tragic event, and now it's his job to tell them what had happened. So he begins his speech with the following words. He says, "I have bad news for you. I have bad news for our fellow citizens and for people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and killed tonight." So he starts off with the bad news, okay? But he doesn't say it's just bad news for you. He doesn't say it's bad news for me. He doesn't say it's bad news for everyone at this rally. He says it's for you, it's for our fellow citizens, and it's for everyone across the world. He's doing this to emphasize how important Martin Luther King was, right? How much he was loved and how influential he was in society at that moment. He takes it one step further and he says, Martin Luther King dedicated his life. If you dedicate your life, it means it's your purpose. It's the only thing you can think of doing, all right? So his purpose right. So his purpose was to spread love and to get justice for all his fellow human beings, right? not just for people, not just for African Americans, sorry, not just for African Americans, but for all human beings, because he believed that every single person deserves to be treated equally and should have the respect of being treated like a human being. And he died because of this effort, right? So his purpose was to spread love and gain justice for all, and because of this, he died. He paid the ultimate cost, and that is essentially what? His life. He paid with his life, as many people did during that time, right? We know from our background information that before Martin Luther King was assassinated, Robert's brother John was also assassinated. And 2 months after Martin Luther King was assassinated, Robert was assassinated as well. Why were they all assassinated? Because they were part of the civil rights movement. They wanted a massive, massive change in the United States of America, and this is it. This is why they were assassinated. Right, let us move on. Okay, he says here, in this difficult day, in this difficult time, for the United States, it is perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in. Right? He uses very specific words here, we and we. The reason why he does this is to create a sense of unity. As to create a sense of unity. At this moment, the country is divided, and with something like Martin Luther King being assassinated, it can create more chaos, it can create more division, and it can just be very bad for the civil rights movement. So he chooses his words very specifically and very carefully here to say that we is creating a sense of unity. He's saying we are in it together. This is emphasized in the next couple of lines. It says, for those of you who are Black, considering the evidence that there were white people who were responsible. So it's obvious, right? It's obvious that a Black person wouldn't go and kill Martin Luther King, right? It was a white person who had done it. So there is evidence that suggests a white person was responsible for the death of Martin Luther King. And because we know this, you can be filled with bitterness. You can be filled with hatred and a desire for revenge, because that's human nature. It's human nature to feel these things when you are hurt. When you're hurt, you feel anger. You want to get revenge. And you want people to suffer the way you are. Why? It's human nature, guys. Right? And he understands this, and this is why he's saying what he does. He's building us up here for something very, very important. We'll get to it, right? So, he says, you can be filled with bitterness, hatred, and a desire for revenge. And we can move in that direction as a country. Again, very specific with his words. He's saying, you are not alone as a country. So if as a country you decide we want to be filled with bitterness and hatred and we're going to get revenge, we will do it together as a country in great polarization. Again, togetherness. Black people amongst Black, white amongst white, filled with hatred toward one another. He ends off this paragraph with such very, very specific words, filled with hatred, because this is what's happening already. He's building a picture for us where this is already happening. And if this is already happening, we should do something different. He backs this up by saying all. When we say all, we're giving you a different option. So he says, or we can make an effort. We can make an effort as Martin Luther King did. Again, with the very, very specific word choice, right? As Martin Luther King did. He's emphasizing the fact that Martin Luther King came here and he dedicated his life to love, all right, and justice. If he dedicated his life to love and justice and he died because of that, it is our responsibility to make sure we are better than that we don't go against what he has taught us and seek revenge for his death. No, because that doesn't make us any better than the people that have killed Martin Luther King. All right? He says we have to make an effort, like Martin Luther King would want us to do, to understand, to comprehend, to replace that violence. We have to replace the violence with what? With compassion and understanding. All right. When he's speaking of the stain of bloodshed here, the stain of bloodshed is the loss of innocent lives. So this is the stain of bloodshed. It is the loss of innocent lives. All right. So he says, yeah, make an effort, make an effort. Right. So in the previous paragraph over here, he's telling us that if you want to respond with anger and hatred, we can do that as a country. And over here, he's telling us, or we can make an effort like Martin Luther King would have wanted us to do. And we can, instead of responding with anger and hatred, we can respond with compassion and love. He's asking them for a very difficult thing. It's not an easy thing to respond with compassion and love when your feelings have been hurt. When your heart is sore, it's not easy to look at the reasons why someone did it. And yet he's asking them to do this. And he knows that it's a difficult thing that he's asking them to do. Okay. Next paragraph, he says, for those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and distrust at the injustice of such an act against all white people, I can only say that I feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. Here, he sympathizes, right? He's showing sympathy. More than sympathy, showing empathy. How can he show empathy? Because remember, he has experienced the same thing. His brother, JFK, was also shot. Right. So his brother JFK was also shot and killed. And it also happened by a white man. It was also a white man that was responsible for killing his brother, right? So he knows the exact feeling that these people are feeling because he has also lost someone that he loved so much, someone who was so influential, someone who was so important, right? And then he backs it up again and he says, we have to make an effort. To make an effort, right? So he shows sympathy and empathy, and then he goes on and he says, but we have to make an effort in the United States, and we have to make an effort to go beyond and to understand in these difficult times. We have to understand why these things have happened, and we need to respond with love and compassion. He constantly emphasizes the word effort because it is an effort. It's not easy to respond with love and compassion. But this is what the country needs. The country doesn't need more violence. The country doesn't need more bloodshed, more loss of innocent lives. The country needs love and compassion, and this is what he's emphasizing here. And then he says, my favorite poet was Aeschylus, and he wrote, in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until, in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. And he chose this quote very, very carefully, because basically what this quote is telling us, that even though we can't see it now, there will come wisdom. Wisdom comes from our experiences. Wisdom comes from experience. And even though you cannot see it now, there is a reason why everything happens. Oh, and it's all essentially can't spell, as you guys can see. All right. So it's all essentially God's plan. All right. This is the will of God. This is God's grace. There's something to be learned from everything. In this moment, it's really terrible. We're hurting a lot. But look a little bit further and understand that you have to go through this moment right now to be where you need to be in the future. Right. And this is emphasized. This quote here is emphasizing what he said earlier, where he says, or we can make an effort as Martin Luther King did to understand and to comprehend. This quote is emphasizing the fact that Martin Luther King was teaching love and justice, and now that he's gone, now is the time to practice that love and that compassion and that understanding that he was preaching for so long. Now is the time to practice it. Because what's the point of following someone wholeheartedly, emphatically, if you cannot practice what they preach? This is it here. All right, let's move on. And then it says here, what we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness. Why do they not need this? Because they already have it. They already have hatred. They already have division. And they already have lawlessness. What do they need? The complete opposite. The complete opposites. Okay. But love, wisdom, and compassion toward one another. So this is what we need. They need love, compassion, and wisdom. A feeling of justice. This is what they need. Right? And not just for black people, not just for white people. Right? For every single person. It doesn't matter if you are blue, green, orange, yellow, pink, black, gray. Whatever color you are, you're a human being and you deserve to be treated with love, compassion, to have a feeling of justice and to be understood. This is what Martin Luther King was preaching, and this is what we are going to strive for. Right? This is what he's saying here in this little paragraph. And then he tells us, so tonight, when you go home, I will ask you to say a prayer, not just for yourself, but say a prayer for Martin Luther King and his family, because you lost someone who was fighting the freedom struggle. But his children lost a father, his wife lost a husband, his mother lost a son. So say a prayer for his family, all right? And at the same time, say a prayer for your own country, which all of us love. Again, here, when he says this, he's creating a sense of unity. Again, he's telling everyone, you are not alone. He's creating a sense of unity. He's saying you're not alone. We are in this together. A prayer for understanding and that compassion of which I spoke. So when you go home today, pray for Martin Luther King and his family. Pray for our country and pray that every single United States citizen finds it within their hearts to respond in this difficult time with understanding and compassion. And then the whole tone of this essay shifts completely. He says, we can do well in this country. The tone is shifting. The tone shifts from sympathy to what? It shifts from sympathy to inspiration. Right. Shifts from, let's put this, make this smaller. So the tone shifts from sympathy to inspiration. But more than this, realism. Okay, he's very realistic when he says, we will have difficult times. He's not being delusional. He's not saying, oh, our difficult times are over now, we can relax. No, he's saying, we will have difficult times. We've had them in the past, and we will continue to have them in the future, because it is not the end of violence. It's not the end of lawlessness, and it is not the end of disorder. But even if that is the case, we can still do well in this country. Why is that? Why is it that he believes he can still do well in the country? Because the vast majority of white people and the vast majority of black people want to live together. If the largest group of white people and the largest group of black people want to live together to improve their quality of life and want justice for all human beings, then they can achieve the goals that were set out by Martin Luther King Jr. If every single person in the country wants this, there is no reason why they cannot achieve it. Right? And then he says, so for us to do this, let us dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many years ago, to tame the savageness of man and to make gentle the life of this world. Let us dedicate ourselves to that and say a prayer for our country and for our people. This here is so important. Right? Tame the savageness of man. What is the savageness of man? The savageness is the innate reaction of violence. So, like I told you earlier, when our feelings are hurt, we tend to respond with anger. That's the savageness within us, right? That is the savageness within us. And to make gentle the life of this earth, when he says to make gentle, it would be the complete opposite of violence. So what is the opposite of violence? Love, kindness, compassion. These are recurring themes throughout our story, right? These are recurring themes. Let me just draw a little area so you know that this goes here. And he ends it off again by saying we need to dedicate ourselves to this. We need to dedicate ourselves to what? Love, kindness, and compassion. And at the same time, we need to say a prayer for our country and for all our people. Right? And this is our story, a eulogy for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by Robert F. Kennedy. Thank you very much.